Thank you very much to BIC. I was quite used to the older building. This is literally the first time I'm speaking in this newer building, partly because of several years of COVID. It's only proper that the first presentation after the publication of this paper a few weeks ago in the American Journal of Sociology is in Bangalore, because the South Indian city mentioned in the paper is Bangalore. So it's we have, I'll give you a list of other cities in the project in a moment. There are other South Indian cities as well. There are Chennai, Hyderabad, Kochi, but more of that a little later. A bit about the background of the project, which has been going on for a few years. First thing to note is that it's a collaboration of scholars at Brown University, and one who was until recently at Azim Premji University, and practitioners at Janagra. We have collaborated for seven years now, a bit more. And the idea of a non-governmental organization, practice-based organization, and academic researchers collaborating was simply because of our belief that research should borrow something from the university setting, but should also be infused with practical ideas, on the ground ideas. And Janagra understands urban governance on the ground much better than the universities do. So that's the basis for our collaboration. And we seek to understand, I'll stay very close to the slides because I think that's simply better than taking off on the slides. I will be very close to the slides. So we seek to understand how citizens practice citizenship, or how citizenship is practiced in urban India, and what are the linkages between how citizenship is practiced and how governance evolves, especially, though not only, the provision of public services. Economics profession defines governance as simply provision of public services. And we, the political scientists, one of us is a political scientist, that's me. Patrick Heller is a sociologist. And Siddharth Swaminathan, our third collaborator, is a heavily statistically trained political sentist. So statistical modeling was primarily his responsibility in this project. Here are the cities under study, 17 across 13 states. Small, by which we mean less than 1 million by 2011 census: Ajmer, Bhavnagar, Jalandhar, Shimoga, Bhubaneswar. Medium, 1 to 3 million: Bhopal, Kochi, Lucknow, Vadodara. Mysore did not technically qualify in 2011 because it's just a bit below 1 million. Just a bit below 1 million. And large, 6 million and above: Ahmedabad, Bangalore, Chennai, Delhi, Hyderabad, Kolkata, Mumbai. One should note that these are 7 of the 8 largest cities of India. The only city excluded from the 8 so-called metropolises is Pune. That's the only city excluded from this. So our conclusions about metropolitan India are almost technically, very nearly technically applicable to all of metropolitan India, because we have covered 7 out of 8 cities. But our other observations should be generalizable to urban India. If you are less than 1 million, no. If you're more than 1 million, it should be generalizable, but we cannot technically say that. It's not a representative selection of cities and it's virtually, we've discussed that, it's virtually impossible to do that. I'm happy to go into methodology for those who are interested in that. But we will have a full-blown theory of metropolitan India, if not urban India, at the end of it. The research is over. We are analyzing and writing at this point beyond Bangalore. Why study Indian cities? Since 1947, social science research in India is almost entirely focused on villages, and understandably so. Very few anthropologists, economists, political scientists, and sociologists have studied cities. I asked Rakesh Mohan, a leading urban economist, once, how many economists study urban India? He said 2.5. Right? Sociologists, you can count on their hands, and political scientists, political science I know very well, and that would be true as well. In 1951, India was a mere 17.3% urban, and only 5 Indian cities had populations greater than 1 million. Census of 2011 says India's population was 32% urban and 53 cities were 1 million plus. And depending on what measures are used, India will be majority urban in 15 years, if not sooner. It's important to emphasize, depending on what measures we use. India's definition is very clear. It depends on size. 5,000 and more should be the population. Density, 400 people per square kilometer and more. And 70% of the population of that geographical unit should derive its income from non-agricultural occupation. That is the definition. And it's that definition which generates the census results. There is another question here, which is a debate is going on about census towns and, etc. But need not detain us here. But when I was doing a bit of research on urban China, and I asked in Shanghai Metropolitan Municipal Office, which has a status, Shanghai has a status of a state. It's not just a city. Beijing Municipal Office, it has a status of a state. There are 5 cities which have state status in China. And those interviews made it very clear, to put it in the language of the municipal administrator, deputy chief municipal administrator of Beijing, urban is what we call urban. That's the Chinese definition. Urban is what we call urban. We keep changing depending on how we have to approach our populations. But Indonesia defines it differently. United Nations, when it puts together numbers, for example, I have no idea why something is attacking us. Do you see? It's frozen as a result, right? Some risk has been detected. But yeah, okay, we're back to normalcy. So it's the Indian definition, if we use that India should be 50% urban by 2035. If you use the American definition, I'm looking into that. In America became 50% urban in 1910. UK became 50% urban in 1880. So some of those studies about transformation of a rural society into an urban one is very relevant to how we understand. It's not exactly the same, but very relevant. Some of those considerations, some of those ideas are very relevant to the ongoing transformation of India. India is under-urbanized for its level of income, even today. Despite the heavy urbanization between 2001 and 2011, the fastest urbanization since 1947 in that decade, is still under-urbanized for its level of income. Why study citizenship practices, a term I have used a few times already. Research on democracy has shed light on 2 kinds of democratic politics in the main. Voting, where we, the political scientists, have done the maximum amount of work. Vote is our primary focus of attention as a discipline when we think of democracy. Mr. Modi thinks the same way. Mr. Modi says that elections are equal to democracy. He's made that claim in different ways. Political science doesn't say that exactly, but it focuses a great deal more on elections than in democracy between elections. And the second is associational politics, which is civil society politics or movement politics, where both political scientists and sociologists have worked together, or even the two disciplines have worked on that. But there's growing recognition that to better understand the depth of democracy, we need to move beyond these two foci and concentrate on the everyday practices through which citizens can claim their rights and which are critical to democratic experience in the 5 years between elections or 4 years between elections in the United States. It then moves the study of democracy from electoral 5-year elections, 4-year elections, to what happens between elections. And citizenship practices, of course, we also know, often diverge from the formal equality of citizens and equality of rights normally enshrined in laws and constitutions, especially democratic laws and constitutions, but not only. Singapore also says that everybody is equal, it's not a democracy. But democracies cannot run away from the idea that everyone has, as Nehru put it in 1942, everyone has equal worth. That you cannot run away from that principle in post-1945 democracy. And Nehru was making that claim in 1942 in a famous statement about why there should be universal franchise in India, even though the literacy rate was going to be expected to be in 1947, what? 17% after 200 years of British rule. 17% literacy rate in 1947. Conceptually, citizenship takes two forms. Vertical, which is a Weberian notion, your rights as citizens vis-a-vis the state is a vertical concept. And horizontal, which is Tocquevillian, your rights vis-a-vis fellow citizens. And those who've read Tocqueville know how important this idea was to him. The idea was born in the United States of America. Tocqueville, the aristocratic scholar from Paris, decided to go to America for a few months. He spent, I think, 7 or 8 months in the US in 1830 to figure out how the first society in the world which was premised on equality functions. French Revolution, he argued, was also premised on equality, but it's an old society where hierarchies were deeply entrenched. And so he wanted to see where in a society where hierarchies were not so deeply entrenched, he was wrong about at least slavery, though there are some chapters of that book which are very good. But in any case, Democracy in America, that all-time classic written in 1832 by Alexis de Tocqueville, a Parisian scholar based in the United States for 8 months, that is about not citizen rights vis-a-vis the state, but citizen rights vis-a-vis each other. We report here in this paper, and so far our analysis is basically on the vertical part, citizen rights vis-a-vis the state, and we have a lot of data on the Tocquevillian question also, how Indians view their rights vis-a-vis fellow Indians, and we will write on that as well. And we'll start that line of argument within the next year or so. One more theoretical point, which is a finding actually, but it should be theoretically presented. We find that the poor access the state through political participation and the rich through particularistic connections, to be explained in a moment. But unlike the conventional, this is also a theoretical point, an important one, unlike the conventional celebration of participation as a citizenship-deepening activity, we also find that a substantial part of political participation, though not all of it, is associated with what we call brokered engagement, a term we are trying to create, which implies use of intermediaries, which is a more common term, or bribes to access the state. Much of this compromises the normative ideals of democratic citizenship. So we are coming to an awkward conclusion that we thought we didn't anticipate, that citizen participation in democratic polity is a double-edged sword. It has pluses and it has minuses. to be explained in a moment a bit more. These are Bangalore-specific results. We'll see how the remaining 16 cities either correspond to or differ from these results. We can all right away tell you Kochi is more or less done. Kochi is quite different from Bangalore. One could say radically different, but we'll hold off for some time before saying that. The final results will be, as I said, more or less generalizable to all of urban India, though not in a technical sense. But it certainly will be, I don't think this is a bombastic claim, it will be the first study of urban India, governance and politics in urban India, not confined to just one city. Those studies are available. There are cities of Delhi, there are studies of Delhi, there are studies of Bhopal, there are studies of Indore, Lucknow, my old town, Allahabad. These are there, but not an all India perspective on urban governance and urban politics. Bangalore data collection, as I said, collaborative effort with Janagraha, which was very beneficial for us, very, very beneficial. The questions they managed to convince us to put on our survey came out of their deep engagement with urban participation and urban governance. Sampling strategy, if you care about that, I think I can leave it here. Sample size, perhaps you should know, 4093, which again, not a bombastic claim. This is the largest sample of a single city, and we have not been able to repeat 4,000 elsewhere, but in other big metropolitan cities, the 7 out of, right, we have 3,000, sample of 3,000, properly randomized at various strata, which is a technical matter, but and in Bangalore, we had randomly chosen 220 wards out of 200. 200 in 2014, they keep changing. I don't know what it is now. It just keeps changing. It's very hard to keep up with how the wards get defined or added or subtracted. And 10 polling parts from each ward. Each polling part, as you know, doubtless, roughly 1,500 to 2,500 adults, covering approximately 17 to 14 streets. That's written in the Election Commission documents. That's what it is. That's what a polling part is. What do Bangalore citizens think of citizenship? Whatever theorists think of citizenship. And I've only talked to you about our rights vis-a-vis other citizens, fellow citizens, and our rights vis-a-vis the state. Two ways in which citizenship is examined. And when we say rights, we mean that particular set of issues or domain is inviolable and is legally protected as such. That would be the idea. That would be how rights and citizenship come together. What are the two most important responsibilities of citizens? Voting, 72%. This will add up to more than 100 because we are asking two questions, two most important responsibilities. Voting, 72%, which is highest everywhere. In all our cities, number one is voting. Voting as the biggest responsibility of citizens. Respecting the law, 71% in Bangalore. It's not the same number elsewhere. In Kochi, it's higher. But elsewhere, in many other towns, it's much lower than 71%. Treating others as equal, 48%. This also fluctuates. And being involved in your community is very low, 6% in Bangalore. This is surprising for us. We thought Bangalore citizens, a town which I call one of my two homes in India, where I've lived for a month and a half every year for the last 20 years or so. I was surprised that this is, and we checked and double checked, it's robust. That's 6% of Bangalore. Our sample saying that being involved in one's community is a very important responsibility, or one of the two most important responsibilities of citizenship. With this background, which will apply to most of our cities, or all of our cities in principle, the three key questions in the AJS paper: who engages the state? And we divided up by religion, caste, class, location, inner wards such as Baswangudi, outer wards such as Nagarpavi, migrant status. What are the modes of engagement? Divided into two parts, direct and broker. Direct is engaging If you have a problem with your water, you go to the water office, whatever appropriate water office, right? That would be direct engagement. You have a problem with you want to get a driving license, you go to the appropriate authority directly. The direct engagement. And the other is brokered, engaging the state through an intermediary, to be specified in a moment. What kinds of intermediaries we're talking about, or bribes, or both. And then the third question we answer in this paper is, what is the effect of the various modes of engagement on whether the issue of concern is resolved? If you wanted a license, did you get a license or not? If you had a trouble with your ration card, did you get the ration card fixed or not? Water, electricity, sanitation, etc. So is direct or brokered engagement more effective? And this will not surprise you when we come to that, the numbers, but it was good to get robust data on this question. How was class measured? Many sociologists I see in the room who have spent a lot of time thinking about this. The standard way in the West and in traditional disciplines is income, assets, and occupations. Right? That's how you do it. One of the three you pick. In India and the global South, due to the size of the informal economy, individual or household level data on income and employment, unreliable or unavailable, and there's no incentive to report assets accurately either. So we went by one of the streams in highly divided societies like the United States, which is heavily racially divided. We went for the spatial way of, and so it's there in American sociology. We are not inventing it. No, that's not the originality we claim. The housing type. Why? It better captures the lived reality of class. Our surroundings, material and human, heavily affect the way how we use our incomes. Hence, spatial data sometimes also used in the West, as I said. Unlike income, this was very important to us. Housing type is not self-reported. Right? There is no problem of under and over reporting here. Field investigators, following extensive training, classified housing types into one of the 5 categories. Okay, housing type 1, informal shacks. Sorry. Housing type 1, housing type 2, slums notified or non-notified. Non-notified can become notified sometimes, or they want to keep their non-notified status. Housing type 3, lower middle class. This is all from Bangalore. We have pictures from everywhere, but we're showing you Bangalore pictures. Housing type 4, upper middle class. Housing type 5, upper class, or the very rich. Upper middle class will have to be called rich in Indian context, or even American context. Right? And one way this is different from the method census deploys is the census calls an entire area a slum or not. Safdarjung, those who lived in Delhi, and this insight emerged from Delhi, and then our other collaborators who have other experiences. If you're in Safdarjung Enclave, where I lived, next to Safdarjung Enclave, across the street is Safdarjung village. Right? For Vasant Vihar, there's a village. For Greater Kailash, there's a village attached to it. Now, the entire area of Greater Kailash cannot be called a slum, but the Greater Kailash, including the slum there, is called Greater Kailash and not non-slum. So by doing this, we are able to identify a place like Safdarjung village, Enclave village, next to Safdarjung Enclave, which we will call a slum, and we'll call housing type 2, rather than include it under the upper class of Greater Kailash or Safdarjung Enclave. Right? So we are able to then differentiate it further. We are giving more graduated data we are able to give you. And this is true in virtually every city, right? Mysore, fabulous houses on one side, the other side of the house, literally shacks. Literally shacks, about 15 of them that Devarajars got them built, right? So, etc. Shacks to slums. I mean, I think it would be unfair to call them really shacks the way the shacks are in the temporary settlements of construction workers in most cities of India. Okay, now let's give you a sense of how middle class Bangalore is. And we are putting together some data. We'll give you exact numbers on virtually every city, because what we are doing is generalizable to city. So informal shacks is 2%. Slum housing, notified and non-notified, is 11%. These are different from census numbers, and we believe our numbers for the reasons that we've just listed. Lower middle class housing is 53% of Bangalore. And upper middle class housing constitutes 25% of our sample, and upper class 9%. So this is a very middle class city. And our sense is, from looking at the data, not very in very detailed manner yet about the size of middle class everywhere, this is either the largest middle class or the second largest after Kochi. This is either the largest, second largest out of our 17 cities. So this is a very middle class city today. And what you hear about Bangalore is statistically very clearly supportable. It's a very middle class city. Now results. I will not bore you with our regression models, logistical regression, and also they don't work everywhere, but work in a lot of cases here. So anyway, who engages? This is not regression based, this is simply reporting raw data. Who engages? 76% of our sample engages the state. 24% does not. What do you engage it for? Why do you need the state? Why do you want to engage the state? For cards and licenses, certificates, basic services, water, sanitation, electricity, and other needs that you cannot fix on your own. Please note that all traditional, conventional, classical literature on public services also included health and education. Classically, conventionally, that was true. And in town after town in our 17 cities, we are coming to the conclusion that health and primary and secondary education are increasingly private sector activities today. The moment you have a little bit of money as parents, you send your child to a private school. Only for the lowest income, not the lowest, only for the lower income households would the India's so-called government schools where I was educated in UP. And many of us were educated in UP. And we got a bilingual education in those schools, government schools of UP. Those are basically for lower income sections of Indian society today. A bit of income and you send your child to Blue Dot, Green Dot, whatever, some private schooling. Muslims engage less than other religious groups. There is no caste differential. This is not simply true of Bangalore, of some other cities also. Dalits engage the state as much as the OBCs and upper caste. There is no statistically spottable, identifiable difference there. The rich, HT4 and HT5, engage less compared to the non-rich. Caste differential is different from upper caste, that's different from HT5 and HT4. That's a class issue. Migrants engage less, outer wards engage more. Nagar Bhavi engages more than Baswangudi. It could be, we are trying to explain why that would be so. Baswangudi has reasonably good public services. You don't need to go to the state. Nagar Bhavi doesn't, so it has to, right? So it's probably need driven, though we'll need some more data to prove that hypothesis. Modes of engagement. That was who engages, now how do you engage? Two types, direct and brokered. Of the 76% who engaged the state, 63% did so directly. Surprised us. 37% through bribes, through brokers or bribes. And using conditional effect regression, but need not detain you, we show that political participation increases the likelihood of brokered engagement for the poor but not for the rich. And official particularistic connections, knowing politicians and bureaucrats, including police officials and etc., increases likelihood of brokered engagement for the rich but not for the poor. So through conditional effects, you can generate this conclusion, which is technically acceptable. In other words, the rich have peers and the poor have patrons. That should not surprise you. That should not surprise you. You can say that statistically we are simply proving something commonsensically known. But not just that. We have to move further. The richer classes are well connected through their positions to various persons of influence. Now, the more important conclusions, at least for sociologists and political scientists, and I hope for our co-citizens as well, who might not be social scientists. Partha Chatterjee has a famous claim, very famous claim, that the rich use their rights, that is civil society, which is based on rights, right? Civil society, by definition, civil society is the non-governmental sector which is protected by law, by definition. Right? So this is why the regime of rights is very clearly expressed through civil society. Rich use their rights to make demands on the state, but and he argued that the poor use politics, electoral politics especially, to make their claims. What we find is rather than seeking redress through rule-bound procedures and civil society organizations, the rich use their privileged connections. That is not the same as civil society. Right? That's not bound by rights or laws, right? This is not civil society. They simply use their connections. However unsurprising it may be for you, but theoretically it's an interesting claim, given how much influence Partha Chatterjee's formulation about the poor using electoral politics and the rich using civil society is in the literature. The poor, by dint of their class position, do not have influential peers, but in a country where the poor are politically active, as they are in India, they do have political ties. They in turn use those links, much as the rich use their peers to get things done. This spectrum corresponds to, now let me refer you back to our political science sociology literature. What is it connecting to? This spectrum corresponds to what the literature identifies as clientelism, Stokes, etc. And clientelism very clearly defined the relationship between politicians and citizens on the basis of a quid pro quo. I do something for you, you give me a vote. That's the technical and the correct definition of clientelism, right? And this is different from patronage. Kanchan Chandra has famously argued India is a patronage democracy. It's a democracy, all right, but it's a patronage democracy. Now, patronage would be essentially Mayawati working mainly for the Dalits, Mulayam Singh Yadav or Lalu Yadav working mainly for OBCs, right? That would be patronage. It's not a quid pro quo, but you're working for your community as an elected politician, which is different furthermore from constituency service. When you, the corporator, is willing to work for and works for every member of your constituency, whether of any caste, of any religion, of any gender. So that is technically constituency service in political science. You're not looking at, that's not partisanship. And it's not only those who voted for you whom you want to serve. You are serving the entire constituency. We have more fine-grained data in our later work. We discovered this more a bit far into our Bangalore research, so we won't be able to give you very good data on this, but we can tell you that constituency service, for example, in the work of Auerbach and Tachil and Jennifer Basil, shows that in India, a lot of corporators and a lot of MLAs, it's not a small number, who work for the entire constituency. For all the bad name they might have, they work for the entire constituency, not simply for their caste, for their religion, and for their for their tribe. So the number is quite large, and they show it to you, these two, and we think they're right. Effectiveness of brokered engagement. Brokered engagement gets the job done more frequently than direct engagement. Of the 76% who engaged, 80% got the job done, and the probability of getting it done through brokered engagement was significantly greater at 99% confidence level. Any statistician who knows what that means, it's almost 100%. We can't have 100% in probability. 99% is as close to certainty as we get, right, in probability theory. So probability of getting it done through brokered engagement was significantly greater at 99% confidence level than through direct engagement. Now, the direct engagement does not work, but brokered engagement works much better. Much, much better. So let's conclude. Neerja Jayal, the preeminent scholar of citizenship in India, has proposed in her famous book, justly famous book, that, quote, Indian democracy should be judged not by measures of voter turnouts or macro-level generalizations about political participation, which has been the focus of much political science and quite a bit of sociology, but through an evaluation of its ability to provide the conditions for the meaningful exercise of citizenship, unquote. We agree. And we do so not just conceptually, which is her contribution. This is how she her final argument about her enduring argument through the book is a very, very good book. We agree with that, but we do so not simply conceptually, but also empirically by examining and measuring citizenship practices in the period between elections. Neerja Jayal is saying, go towards what happens between elections. Look at democracy that way also. Is citizenship, that is a body of rights, legally and constitutionally given, are they practiced well or not? Democracy literature has to move in that direction. She is right. Compared to so we agree, and we do so, as I said, we measure, compared to the classes below them, the richer classes engage the state less. We knew that. This particular argument emerged from the Lokniti research, but about voting, not about engaging the state. This is about engaging the state. Yogendra Yadav, Suhas Palshikar were the first to make the argument about voting. The rich are not voting as much as the poor. And that began, that particular turn in India's electoral politics begins around 89 and is perhaps being partially reversed, though we don't know yet. We need some more data on one more election maybe, 2014, 2019 and 2024, in order to make a very solid claim about what's happening now on that dimension. And these two sets of classes also engage the state differently. You heard that. The rich approach the state via particularistic connections of influence, and the classes placed below them use political participation. A substantial portion of households find it necessary to engage the state through mediation. That is by either paying bribes or using an intermediary. Paying bribes is a clear perversion of citizenship. Brokerage is a bit more complicated. It has been briefly hinted at so far in the discussion. Let's make it clearer. While some intermediaries may be playing a role that is perfectly consistent with democratic norms, for example, an elected official who is simply providing constituency service, that's perfectly consistent with the democratic theory and democratic ideals. I am your representative, I will work for you. Please remember that one of the great Nehru arguments and Ambedkar arguments about why the illiterate should also have the right to vote was not only that all of them have equal worth. That was argument number one. The argument number two was, if you give them the right to vote, then they will be able to unclog the closed gates of state and bureaucracy through their representatives. Otherwise, this bureaucracy trained in British ways is impervious to the poor and the common masses. Through their representatives, they open it up. Right? It's something like that. Constituencies, we have a new term for it, constituency service. Other forms of brokerage activity weaken democracy. In citizenship, as for example, when a service is predicated in partisanship, I as an elected official, elected politician, corporator, MLA will work only for my caste, only for my religion. That's a perversion of the democratic ideal. Or a quid pro quo for vote. It doesn't work in India, clientelism, but it's a major issue in African politics and Latin American politics. Clear quid pro quo, evidence of that. Not in India, it can't work the way Indian electoral democracy is set up. Going back to Alexis de Tocqueville, it has long been argued, you heard that also briefly, but it should be put forward as a clear conclusion. It has long been argued that participation cultivates good citizens. While this may be generally true, when it comes to engaging the state, we find quite the opposite with respect to many, if not all. Those among the poor who are politically engaged are much more likely to engage the state through practices, bribes, and partisan brokers that may be corrosive of citizenship. It may be that they have no other better choices, but that does not invalidate the claim that clientelism, if not constituency service, significantly undermines democracy and citizenship. Thank you. Ravi, were you going to field the questions? Or?
Yes, if anybody has a question, I can just bring the mic over to you. So.
Yeah, I was given 40 minutes, 43 minutes. Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Can you give him the microphone?
Yes, just one.
Okay.
So, citizens were interviewed for the purpose of insights, understanding. Was the governance also involved in conversations, and why not?
Government also involved?
I mean, was the state also?
Why? We are trying to find out from citizens how they relate to the state. We don't want state officials there. Otherwise, the whole exercise of interviewing, that would undermine the basic premise of interviewing citizens about the state. If the state officials are also there who have power over them.
But wouldn't that be a part of the story at least, if not?
Yeah, but we know that. So it would be in survey research, one term is socially desirable, which is, for example, Ajmer is reporting to us that there is no discrimination in Ajmer. We can't believe it. So people are saying there is no caste discrimination, there is no religious. This is a city of Salim Chishti ki dargah. Hindus, Muslims, everyone goes there. That is socially desirable in that city. People say that. We have to somehow figure out what to do with that data. But you don't want that social desirability. Then there is what is administratively desirable to say. You have the boss sitting there and you want ordinary citizen to tell us whether the state is providing the goods that it's supposed to provide or not. No. It will violate the first principle of survey research and good research in general. We will not get honest answers. That's why. We have some questions, incidentally, on police conduct, which we have not presented to you here. Imagine a police official there and we're asking citizens, does the police work for you? It won't happen, right? That's not how we can do research on these questions. Sudhakar.
I recall that you have been working on democracy between elections in the past also. I've seen a couple of your articles on the subject. But this more detailed survey and analysis, what among the conclusions took you by surprise? Was there any surprise at all?
In Bangalore, so there was a Bangalore and Karnataka of pre 1975, 76, 77, let's say pre-1980 days. And the political science literature on that period of Karnataka is clear that this is the least corrupt, most peaceful, most well-administered, among the most well-administered states of India. So much available on that period. 80 onwards, it begins to change, and now generally it's believed. Some studies also show that, I think, yes, they do, that levels of corruption have gone up very significantly. There is a 40% argument. It was in the previous election. Contractors Association made the representation that the previous government had a 40% take, right? The Contractors Association making that claim, who get contracts from the state. So given that perception, for all our fondness for Karnataka and for my personal fondness for Bangalore, I didn't expect that 33% of 76%, which adds up to about 28% of Bangalore, would say that it went through brokered engagement, right? So, right, that's the, so of the 76% who engaged, 67% engaged directly, and 33% of 76% say they engage brokers. Now, you can never get precise data on bribes. It's not possible. You have to find ways of asking them about, so when you went for this license, what did you have to do? Instead of asking them, did you pay a bribe? You ask them, what did you do? And it's through that indirect method you calculate, right? Otherwise, you will not get it. You will get a socially desirable answer. The person doesn't know who's going to use this information, right? So one answer to you, Sudhakar, is that we expected lower direct engagement and greater brokered engagement with the state. Now, you may say we were wrong, but that was the expectation. We have to report data regardless of what our expectation is. This is the data. We did not expect also that that we will come to the conclusion that political participation is a double-edged sword. That it is citizenship deepening, making you more conscious of your rights, that is to say, at one level. At another level, it is clearly connected to a lot of corruption. The so-called corrupt practices of democracy are connected to that in a big way, not in a. What is political participation? Not only voting. We ask them, did you go to rallies? Do you campaign for a party? Did you campaign for a party? We ask all those questions. Those who go for rallies, those who go for not only vote in the case of voting, those who go for those who campaign on behalf of the party, you examine their answers to several of our questions. Their relationship with democracy is fairly corrupt. Now, please note that in one of the famous arguments of Samuel Huntington is that you shouldn't say that corruption negates democracy completely. Corruption would be there in a democracy and would be there in non-democratic systems also. That does not undermine the claim that a polity is democratic. However hard you might wish to have a non-corrupt polity, right? Which you should. But there is a way in which democratic politics work in the United States, elsewhere, that the relationship between democratic politicians and citizens, while at one level citizen deepening, can also be fairly corrupt. So the famous argument from the United States was that within a few months after your arrival from Italy, southern Italy, on the shores of New York or eastern United States, a politician would come to you and say, we'll get your child access to a good school, we'll get you access to a good health clinic. And southern Italians who came were quite poor. They were not coming from the north, right? You give us your vote, right? So it's not just India. So there is a certain sense in which some element of this kind of clientelism is there in democratic practices. However, this doesn't mean we shouldn't campaign for democracy, or we should prefer non-democratic system over democratic. No, none of that follows. It's just that we should be aware that democratic ideals and democratic practices can diverge, and we should still support democracy, normatively speaking. I'm sure, Sudhakar, there will be 3 or 4 another point or so will emerge. I'll communicate that to you. The two are very clear from this. Yeah.
I mean, in your study, you found out that, I mean, the conclusion was that brokered engagements produce 99% results. Well, here the general perception.
Sorry?
Pardon?
Voter engagement?
Broker
engagement?
99% rate produces results. Now, the general perception otherwise, I mean, generally is that, say, in Chennai, if you engage with a broker, could get in Bangalore, it will be around 60% only. That is, everybody says
data. 99% confidence level, not 99%.
Results.
Confidence level, which means when you compared the work done through direct engagement,
right,
and brokered engagement, when you compare that, then the possibility of getting things done through brokered engagement compared to direct engagement.
Compared to.
Yeah. You have 99% confidence level in that finding. Not that 99% of brokers deliver. No. 99% confidence in the finding that brokerage is more effective in getting your license, getting you your caste certificate, getting you your ration card.
Yeah. Here the general perception.
Not 99% overall. 99% statistically.
Okay. Another question is, you said that there is some peculiarity about Kochi. I'm familiar with both the cities, Bangalore and Kochi. What may be that? And one more question I had. Okay.
So I'll tell you what we are analyzing. We've done quite a bit of Kochi work already, but we haven't produced a paper like this. But the biggest difference in Kochi compared to all 16 cities that are in the project, and certainly for Kochi's size, 1 million plus category, right? In Kochi, can you imagine what is the proportion of the population in slums? What is the proportion of Kochi population in slums? 5%. Less than 2. Less than 2. This is a truly remarkable achievement for a city. A truly, truly remarkable achievement for a city. That slums have been reduced to less than 2% of the population of Kochi. Incidentally, Bangalore, if you go through the slum literature, there's huge amount of literature. Bangalore is also among the lower end. Bangalore is more than half of Bombay lives in slums. 52% according to official count, right? In 2011, 52% of Bombay. What are we getting in Bangalore? It's generally, census would tell you about 16%. We are getting less than that. So Bangalore is is towards the lower end of the slum population city-wise. But Kochi, less than 2%. And we went to some of those places. You know, first of all, there's no one in shacks. No one in shacks. I'm sure there are, but we couldn't find them. And the municipal office also said, so where can we take you? Where are the shacks? One of our co-workers is sitting here. We couldn't find them. I don't know how. Did we find them finally? We couldn't find them. It's basically, that's right. So this is a truly remarkable achievement for a city. Whatever your other objections to Kochi, you know, too much equality, some people have objection to that. Some people do. I don't. Right? Some people do. Too much equality is a problem. Then you don't have enough incentives for entrepreneurs to become bigger and to earn more and to produce more and to make, etc. You can have all kinds. These are certainly in economics there are arguments about this. Sure, that equality is not a great virtue. It inhibits entrepreneurship. You know, there is an argument about that. It's well known in economics and business schools. So, but Kochi is a, it was so hard to find slums in Kochi. That's a very big difference. What? Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of migration. The person who won the Kochi Award for writing in Malayalam and at the school level is a Bengali girl, right? It was so she won that award while the year we were there doing our work. So there is a lot of migration in Kochi from other parts. There's a huge migration from eastern India and northeast to the south in general, and now increasingly from the north. This is a new phenomenon in Indian history. Huge migration from the north to the south, right? Because south is doing much better economically than the north. So yes, there'll be a lot of migrants, but are the migrants professionals or they are workers also? And if they're workers, you see, I think Kerala would protect workers quite a bit more than any other places, including Congress governments, not just communist governments, including Congress government, because that's part of the way that state has developed. With very strong notion of worker rights. And the informal economy is not so large, right? So that's why these are all the very important differences between Kochi and other cities. We were ready for all of this in Kochi, but the extent surprised us, the degree surprised us. I have worked in Kerala before for Hindu-Muslim relations. I worked in Kozhikode a lot. And I didn't work in Kochi, but Kochi was, the degree was surprising. Not the statements I have made as tendency, but the degree of that.
Yeah, good evening, Professor. My doctoral dissertation is on last mile policy implementation and accountability. I have worked in Nagpur, and most of my observations, I'm yet to submit my thesis, but I'm glad to report that corroborate with what sort of your propositions are. And I wish I could attend your classes when. So good thing, I have 4 questions, but I will quickly do them.
Yeah.
So one is about particularistic connections, but here in this case, the rich people who have peers, isn't it because of their social economic position? So can we kind of ignore structure? So when I was reading your paper, which you had shared on social media, that is your principal argument. So that is the question related to particularistic connections. Second is on when you say participation as a double-edged sword. So somewhere I'm getting this impression that what happens to the sort of these years of efforts by civil society to institutionalize participation. So should we kind of differentiating between this brokered engagement and the kind of participation efforts which have happened under the discourse of decentralization. Third one is related to when these changed governance structures are there, which is the outsourcing of the services. In that case, it is in a way the intermediary role is becoming an imperative for the ward councillors for their own sustenance, to remain relevant in their constituencies. So how do we kind of then deal with that? And fourth is what happens when we bring the migrant and non-migrant issue in a city to the brokered engagement. So one of our, so I am at Center for Policy Studies, IIT Bombay. So they're one of the person who has worked, and there is this deep sentiment of son of soil in the frontline bureaucracy and sort of bureaucracy in general. So in terms of providing access to the water services. So it's like, if I can speak in Hindi, कि हम उन्हें पानी तो देंगे, लेकिन वो पानी उनका है नहीं. इस तरह का एक sentiment was reported. So
could you say that again? हमको
पानी तो देंगे, जो वो उनको पानी तो देंगे पीने के लिए, लेकिन वो उनका हक नहीं है. So we provide them the services, but it is not their right.
Who says that?
So this is a frontline bureaucrat who is saying it, that of course we would give it to them, but it is not their right. So somewhere whenever this kind of migrant, non-migrant issue comes, so for migrants, somewhere the brokered engagement becomes an imperative for them as well. So
very well put. Thank you.
Yeah.
So class is a structural category to decentralization and its whether the participation that will emerge from emerging from decentralization is a double-edged sword. 3, non-migrants need intermediaries more because the frontline bureaucrat is saying water is not their right. And third was?
To change governance structure
when the services are outsourced and privatized, then intermediaries will be more important, right? Okay.
Ward councillors
Yeah.
consider it as an imperative for them to remain relevant.
Yeah. Thank you. Excellent questions. Thank you very much. About the class, our claim is not surprising anymore. When I was being trained at JNU and I was a budding Marxist, I reduced everything to class. And I can't do it anymore, honestly. I stopped doing that around halfway through my PhD, and I just tweeted recently that three books that killed the budding Marxist in me at MIT were Jagdish Bhagwati and Padma Desai's book called Planning for Industrialization. That really undermined my faith in planning. It was that remarkable a book. Second, Milan Kundera's novel Unbearable Lightness of Being. This is the kind of communist society or Marxist society that is being built. I don't want it. Right? This is unbelievable. The extent to which state interferes in a hospital there, right? And the third was a political philosophy book by John Elster called Making Sense of Marx. Anyway, sorry for that slight aside, but some academic gossip we should have. Yeah. So the main point here is that if you do it the structural way, then how exactly it operates is not fully predicted by that. So let's say if you do it, income as the structure, right? Now, at the same level of income, what we are saying through a spatial method, at the same level of income, depending on where you live, your connections will be very different, right? Depending on where you live, especially, but you can extend this further also. So the same structural definition of class becomes experientially very different if you inject spatial considerations into it, right? You are as rich as the person 5 miles away, but he is living in Greater Kailash, and you're living in somewhere else, and that makes a difference, a very big difference, right? So that's the point. Decentralization obviously has increased participation, right? We only had 2 tiers of government. After the 73rd and 74th, we have a third tier of government. But the important thing to note is that all available studies show that rural self-government is working much better than urban self-government. There is no doubt about that given, and we will, in one part of the project is, which is still to be finished, is that we will pick 4 cities out of our 17, and then we'll compare their governance with surrounding villages to answer this question that is emerging, that rural self-governance, rural governance in India is better than urban governance, right? So outsourcing will be basically municipal urban affair, right? So as it is, it's not as good as, my point is, as it is, it's not as good as rural governance, right? And participation there in rural India is not flawless, no. Definitely not. But it is, despite corruption or the extent of corruption that might exist, is working better. Working better is the conclusion of a number of studies that have recently started emerging. One of them is by Gabriela Crooks-Wisner and Adam Arbach. They compare. She studies rural Rajasthan. He studies urban Madhya Pradesh and urban Rajasthan. And comparison has led to this famous article they wrote in Perspectives in Politics, which is cited here, and which we found really convincing. Okay. So outsourcing will certainly increase the role of intermediary, right? But so long as the intermediary is connected to some kind of constituency service, if that's how he is being used, as opposed to very sectional or partisan provisioning. So the greater role of intermediary per se is not a problem. If the intermediary is connected to constituency service, you have no problem. If the intermediary is connected to partisanship, only for my caste, or only for my religion, right, or only for my tribe, then it's a problem, analytically and otherwise. And the fourth question, please remind me. Yeah, so the frontline bureaucrat who said that the migrants into Bangalore don't have a right to water is flat wrong, right? That's an all India. This is not China, where in order to come to the city you need special permission, and if you arrive in the city as a rural person without permission, then you don't have rights. No, Indian rights do not depend on whether you are in the village or in the city. We have all India rights, right? And to say that the access to water is not a right, you can say we can't give you. Gujarat says we can only give you water for 2 hours. I've asked Gujarati, the chief secretary once, I asked him, why can't we have the Californian kind of system? California imports all its water from Canada. It's a dry state. Kerala is water surplus, you are water scarce. Why can't you import water from Kerala? He said, I never thought of it. I said, think about it. Maybe it's possible. I don't know. There's a technical issue here. How do you import water in India? Canada provides half, maybe up to half of, in many parts of California, up to half of California's water. Right? So anyway, the point is, you can say that I can give you water only for 2 hours. I just don't have. Right? But you can't say that if you're living here and you're Indian citizen, no, you don't have a right to water. That's wrong, in my view. Though, I mean, we have some senior bureaucrats sitting here, they can tell me if I'm wrong. Whether you can say on the municipal level, somebody does not have a right, even though he's an Indian and he's migrated. There are no restrictions on migration in India. You don't need Chinese-style permission to move from a village to the city of Bombay. Right? Okay. Other questions? Yeah.
Yeah. While you said that constituency service is, there's no problem with that and it's, democratic. I see.
Yeah, constituency service
is
not a problem from democratic.
But from a governance point of view, when most of the people feel voting is their top, citizenship duty, and services, there's no incentive for the elected representative to fix the system if constituency service is the means of getting people the service. What I'm saying is the MLA will not do systemic change. I mean, he's not supposed to do this, but there's no incentive to fix the system because people will keep coming to you to fix the problem. And then they will feel that you're doing work, and you're saying that that's because they're giving it to everyone, whether they people who voted for them or not, that it's good. But I'm saying from a governance point of view, there is so therefore what I was going to ask you is, after you do this, is there an intention to put a layer of the quality of services in a city with this, because that would affect the way people access services?
I think there is clearly more than an iota of truth in what you're saying. In principle, you should leave it to the bureaucrat to deliver services. It's his job, her job. And why should you need an MLA or a corporator to come and tell the bureaucrat, water is to be provided or sanitation is to be provided, electricity and all that. I think in principle you're right. And I think Nehru was posed this question too, incidentally. I think I remember that, the discussion there. He said, no, I'm not saying that bureaucrats should not deliver all this. I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying that it's not in the nature of bureaucracy, trained in the colonial modes of governance, to serve citizens. And therefore, politics is the way we will open up the bureaucracy. He used the term clogged bureaucracy, right? So if the bureaucracy is unclogged, you don't need MLAs to do the job. If the bureaucracy is clogged, then you need a politician to come and either make a telephone call or scream a little. Right? So the answer, but that also doesn't fully answer your question. You're saying that if the politician is doing the constituency service, then there is no incentive for the bureaucrat to provide that.
No, for the system to fix it.
Right. So, yeah, I think there's something there. I don't know how to solve that problem. There's a serious element of truth in what you're saying. Right? And can we expect the bureaucracy to deliver what it's supposed to deliver, the public services, without political intervention? In principle, we should. But if political intervention takes place, then there is no particular incentive for the bureaucrats to think that he should provide. We'll have to listen to the politician to the extent possible, right? So yes, there is a chicken and egg problem here. Yes, in an analytical sense, I don't think one can deny the truth of your claim. But in a practical sense, how long do you wait before the bureaucracy is unclogged? How long do you wait for something like water, sanitation, right? How long do you wait for the unclogging of bureaucracy? And Nehru says that actually. Nehru has I don't remember now, in one of the letters he used to write to chief ministers, something like that. Either there or in one of the speeches of the many speeches that all of us political scientists have read, and all those letters that we've read, there is this argument about unclogging the bureaucracy.
Yeah, the current dispensation has worked out a social experiment called Digitizing India, which millennials like me have benefited, and those who are tech savvy. What are your thoughts on how this new medium can work in reducing brokered engagement in the future?
So, excellent question. Thank you for asking that. This is certainly a new dimension. And its implications in India should be very serious. The digitization of public service delivery and direct benefit transfer. I don't know about public service delivery, direct benefit transfer for sure, DBT. The number of people who received direct transfers to their bank accounts is exponentially higher compared to earlier. And then the point that Bangalore software geniuses made, that even the illiterates can find out whether the money has come to their bank accounts because the phone can speak to them. They can't read, but through technology, right? Through software, you can make the phone speak to them. 10,000 rupees aapke bank mein aa gaye. Right? So this is a very, very remarkable development. Now, but as a researcher, I will cite you the research that is best known for this now, right? Karthik Muralidharan, an economist at the University of California, San Diego, who works on Indian economy, has now a famous paper published in Journal of Political Economy, which asked a very simple question that people who do randomized controlled trials today under J. Pal's influence, Abhijit Banerjee and Esther Duflo, the Nobel laureates, they are not interested in big economic theory questions anymore. They're interested in practical questions and use of their methodology to answer. So Karthik Muralidharan studied in Andhra Pradesh, before it broke up into two, the impact of digitized identity cards on corruption. And he, through the size of his sample, believe it or not, is 15 million or something like that. And that could only have been done with the cooperation of the government, right? Otherwise, as researchers, if we don't work with government, we can get, I got 5,000 here, I can go up to 10,000. But a 15 million sample done in a randomized control way required that the finance secretary of Andhra Pradesh or the finance minister of Andhra Pradesh or the chief secretary of Andhra Pradesh collaborated with the study. and the impact is 17% according to that study. Corruption goes down by 17%. Right? Now that's a serious difference. Maybe some people thought it should have been bigger, but it's for our purposes, it's a very serious difference that was established. So yes, digitization, if we want to conclude generally from that, but we should be careful, we should think about what service we're talking about, etc. But digitization should reduce the corruption in which the intermediary might engage. But intermediary is not a bad idea if it's connected to constituency service. That's not a bad idea, right? As I said, if it's connected to some other bribes or very partisan provisioning of public services, then it's a different issue. But intermediary itself is not a problem, according to the theory here. Though it would not be able to answer the question asked here. If the intermediary were not there, either the corporator or an MLA, or some other politician, or some local strongman, or something like that, if he were not there, perhaps the bureaucracy would unclog itself. I don't know the answer to that, right? But digitization has led to reduced corruption as far as the IDs are concerned. That is clear from that study, and it's very robust. See, you don't get samples that large. Now, would it apply to other states? Most probably yes, though he's not been able to do it in Bihar. He was trying to do it in Bihar. The same study, he couldn't do it in Bihar because Bihar government didn't cooperate. They didn't want that study, right? Andhra did. So we have this great result from Andhra Pradesh. So that's my answer to a very important question, and we'll have to wrestle with that. Further researchers will have to wrestle with that, given how much digitization is taking place in India in the last 7, 8, 9 years, 10 years, or since the birth of Aadhaar, which goes back to what, 2010, I think, 2011.
Hi, thank you so much for your talk today.
Could you speak just a bit louder? Yeah.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, I had a couple of questions. Did you find any correlation between the importance given to community participation as a form of citizenship and the number of migrants in a city in other places?
Could you go a little slowly? For some reason, your voice is not coming out clearly.
That's all right, sorry.
Yeah.
Did you find any correlation between the importance given to community participation as a form of citizenship and the number of migrants in a city?
And what migrants in the city?
The number of migrants in a city.
I can answer that question a little later when we compare which cities have more migrants, which cities have less, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a comparative question.
Right.
That can't be answered on the basis of Bangalore alone. Bangalore will have to be compared to something, right? So it's a fabulous question, it's a terrific question, and we are aware that about the significance of the question.
Right.
But we can't answer as of now.
Okay.
Next year, if I give a talk here, I will be able to answer.
Great. And just one more question is, what exactly stood out to you when compared to participation between sex-based participation in civil society? Did you see maybe more female participation in Bangalore, or was it still primarily just male participation, if that was something you were looking at?
The truth is that even though we were interested in the gender question quite a lot, but all surveys, when you do survey research, perhaps you do, no questionnaire should be more than 45 minutes long. Otherwise, biases get into, when people are tired, you get wrong answers or unreliable answers. The implication of that is that you will have to, regardless of how many questions you are interested in, and we were interested in gender very seriously, you will have to draw a line somewhere. And for the purpose of urban governance, we thought that something else perhaps was, given the available literature, was more important. This is not to say that gender is not important. Something else seemed to be more important. And if we are wrong, we'll be proved wrong in research, right? So, no, we couldn't study what you're asking in any detail, significant detail. We have some references to it but this 45-minute thing, never more than an hour, right? Every experienced survey researcher will tell you. Never more than an hour, because you will get tired, wrong, in unreliable answers. People just can't go on answering questions for more than that.
Good evening, Professor.
Yeah.
So, can you give a rough comment on the religious harmony of this city?
Could you repeat that? Yeah.
Can you give a comment
On the
religious harmony of this city?
one thing that you noted here, religion is not driving too many results here. Certainly not in Bangalore. That may have something to do with how fairly well established the Muslim community of Bangalore is. It could be that, right? It's not driving result. The only thing that is, from a religious perspective, from a religious division perspective, that we find Muslims are engaging less with the state. That's all we find. In no other modeling, while we going for religion there, we are finding any statistically significant result. So religion is not driving the result. That's the answer on Bangalore. Now, this was done in 2014. What is true today, we don't know, but somebody will have to do this. A lot has happened in the city since 2014. And whether religion has become a significant driver of public services, I don't think I'll be able to answer that. I'll give you the answer based on 2014. Religion is not driving it. And there are other studies of Muslims and Christians in Bangalore. There are more qualitative studies which are saying the same thing. The Muslim community is very well established in Bangalore. And quite a substantial proportion is fairly rich, right? So that changes the way the local state and the Muslims interact. That changes that significantly. I won't be able to say that about Ahmedabad, for example, where most Muslims, a very large proportion is very poor, and they live very separately, right? There is a whole new colony that has emerged. It's almost actually a township that has emerged and it has been the size has been increasing since the 69 riots. 69 is the turning point. During Congress rule, 69 is one of the biggest. 1969 Ahmedabad riots are one of the biggest riots India saw, right? Which were only in the 1990s did you get a larger riot in any given city. 69 was that bad. So the trend began there. Johapura it's called. Johapura is a new township where only basically Muslims live. Though some are rich, it's not that. But it's an entire township that has emerged of could be a couple of lakh people. It's possible. More than that, maybe.
So you did say that a comparative study is not yet possible, but I want to understand if this analysis does any kind of comparison within Bangalore, say for example, between a Baswangudi or an electronic city. So typically the responses are going to be correlated with caste or income levels. I mean, the segregations are going to be correlated with that. But since your methodology has this aspect of housing type, I'm curious to understand if there is any significant difference that can be attributed to, say, a Basavanagudi or an electronic city or an Indiranagar.
So class is driving it. The biggest results are appearing through class, right? Class is driving it. But we have another paper that we published in EPW on Bangalore on precisely this material, where we show that, and this will, that result, it's a purely empirical result, and whatever our ideological positions or normative positions, it's purely, they certainly gladden the heart of Democrats, which is, it takes the following form, the EPW paper. It's not that the poor areas of Bangalore are serviced as well as the richer areas. No, that's not the case, and that you wouldn't expect that to be the case, right? However, careful statistical analysis shows that if the poor did not participate in elections and in other political activities, their fortunes will be lower and their welfare would be lower. That you can statistically show through conditional effects, actually. That is the EPW paper. That through elections and political participation, the poor are getting more than they would otherwise, though they won't get as much as the richer parts of the city. Right? So that's the answer to your very good question. It's not just a question of Baswangudi versus Nagar Bhavi. It's a question of class, more importantly than other things. Right? So HT4 and HT5 would be better. Right? So Baswangudi, most of it would be HT4 and HT3, I think. Right? Some other places would be, given what's happened to Bangalore, would be HT5. Right? Much of Indiranagar would be HT4 and HT5. So there's the class that would drive that result.
Hi.
Yeah.
So
I'm happy to take questions if you allow them. Yeah, sure. It's up to you to close the meeting. You're the boss. Yeah.
yeah. So I was.
Yeah.
I think the bracketing here is a housing type. So if the parameter is changed, that's one question. If the parameter or the bracket is changed, the politics, how we analyze this urban thing will change. And I was reminded of Zizek actually in this portion, because when you mentioned partisanship or patronage, even a very aspiring politician who wants to do that service, irrespective of any class, caste, religion, or whatever, he will still have the incentive to go for patronage or partisanship and mislead the people that I'm actually serving you. So what I feel is I'm reminded of Zizek that the drive will always be to maintain that partisanship while portraying that I'm clean and that I have a desire to serve you. So what I felt was this is not a double-edged sword actually. So drive will keep continuing. That's what my personal basic inference from this, that drive will keep going. So the desire will never be achieved as far as pure service.
The study, excellent question. Thank you for asking. The study that more directly addresses that than what we've done is the study of Bhopal and Jaipur by Adam Auerbach and Tariq Tachil. And they deal with a very important issue. When politicians deal with slums where their votes are, those, right? How do they think about who should they serve? And the proportion of those who serve the entire constituency without partisanship is higher than those who only serve their community and are therefore clearly partisan. So for them, that's the question they're addressing. That's not the only question here. For them, that's the only question. So I should therefore defer to them, right? Given that that's the question they're trying to answer. Is it that what they found in Bhopal and Jaipur is specific to Bhopal and Jaipur, or does it have external validity? I can't answer that question, right? But Bhopal and Jaipur show that in areas, the large parts of Jaipur and Bhopal, which are covered by slums, where lower income people live, right? The politicians who represent them, a very large proportion, those politicians are doing constituency service and not engaging in partisanship. Right? That should be, it's a surprising conclusion, but they have very clear evidence for it.
Thank you, Professor Varshney, for this absolutely engaging talk.